Okay, I'll switch back to me, and then you will see yourself, me. Okay, you're a wee bit left of frame. We are recording.
We are? Excellent.
Well, Eva,
Is that better?
welcome to Bases, whatever hell it is, 60, 25,
27?
20, Bases 27, part 7, is it? Yeah. Well, the last Bases we did, part 6, was more of a sort of a conversation, and we said a few things, and this is really to sort of deal with that in a more formal way rather than a public library where you're wearing a mask and having to sort of hide a bit and all that.
Yeah, it wasn't hiding. It was more like
Well,
I was in a situation. I've been in a situation where I've been kind of laying low, waiting for certain elements that have always been a thorn to try and attack me, which they did try in October. So
explain all
they
that.
fell into their own net. Well, basically, it's difficult because of my husband's position.
And
so
could you, from the perspective of people who haven't seen parts 1, 2, 3 to whatever, and the whole super soldier thing, what is your husband's position? And then people who used to pick up from this in 2022, which were right in the middle of the week before Christmas 2021. So from that perspective, it's 11 years, is it 10 years after the Super Soldier Summit 1 and 2, and a whole lot of things happened. So we didn't have Super Soldier Summit 3. And a whole lot of things happened in the middle of all that with the death and murder of Max Spiers, James Casbolt in jail, and potentially released into secure custody. So that's the two main characters. And then we mentioned things about Sarah Adams, who's meant to be after me. And maybe she's not. Maybe she's saying nice things, but, you know.
No, she doesn't.
And also James Rink. And there's all the main characters. It was basically one hell of a row in 2012 at Super Soldier Summit 1, Super Soldier Summit 2, and things got so bad they didn't have a Super Soldier Summit 3, which was all organised by Lorien Fenton, who in the most recent incarnation was involved with the brilliant, I thought, fantastic thing with Bob Brown, the UFO MegaCon, about 3 years ago. It was really great, such a refreshing new start. That all sort of went east-west, and I gather that Sarah is now part of this board of directors of that conference, or is it the International UFO Congress?
I have no idea,
which one?
and I have no interest in her at all.
Okay.
And any built on her is garbage.
So it's very important that we're not sure whether it's the International UFO Congress or Bob Brown's UFO MegaCon. But anyway, apparently... I mean, and if anybody's doing a career thing, good luck to them, right? But when it's going to come out on me and whatever.
The problem is that
over to you.
She's building her career. She's building her career on the backing of you and I after Max's death. So because we gave her that chance to do good and do right, you know, because everybody deserves a second chance to have an opportunity. She's amassed support, but the problem is that she would never reciprocate, and she won't admit where she's tried to leverage a lack of understanding to propel herself forward at the cost of others. That's where the problems lay, because now anyone that goes to work with her thinking, you know, all these things, they're lies. So it's not going to work, right? Until she comes to a place where she can actually be transparent. And that's not on me, and that's not on you. That's on her. And that's important that moving forward, anyone that tries to build with her has that understanding. That's important, because I'm not lending my word to her any longer. I made that mistake, right? My husband was brought into a naval program, I believe through his uncle, who were family, naval career family, you know, Brockbrader, German. That moved him in the early 90s to San Diego. in California, out of Utah, Salt Lake, Mormon, Utah. So he was brought into basically the projects that Kennedy had created, an Irish Catholic, to start to work within the Navy to counter the potential of a breakdown of the United States Constitution, which is what the Latter-day Saints are all about. They're based on the last days, and specifically the Constitution of the United States for Utah Mormons. So when my husband and I came out in 2012, he didn't have a lot of evidence, but what he did have was his knowledge as a Utah Mormon that gave him a lot of wisdom around what happens behind the scenes that most people do not have. So he had, before he came out on Carrie Cassidy's Project Camelot in 2012, he had been in Las Vegas. And the work he was doing in Las Vegas was directly tied to the 100-year banking charter ending in 1998-99, which was what basically was the bond that backed the United States Constitution. So most people don't understand those kinds of logistics. But that's what President Kennedy was working towards when he started the 0111 executive order and started working with Sukarno, President Sukarno of Indonesia, trying to reestablish a financial movement in United States currency. So the SEALs were created by Kennedy. Go ahead.
There's the Navy SEALs, but you were talking about the as opposed to the Federal Reserve note. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, tied into all of that. And my husband was brought into a SEAL project that was kind of an offshoot black. He trained in the very same way that most of the SEALs trained. He had some of his program shortlisted, like he didn't have everything that all the SEALs get because it wasn't something that he was able to do. They had to move him in a parallel project, but also keep it secret. So he did train alongside Eric Prince of SEAL Team 8. And last time we talked, when I was at the library, unfortunately, and had to have a mask on because the library is a, socialist run program in Canada. And I had to have my mask on because of the library mask Nazis coming around. I did try to start the interview without it, but I didn't. I'm picking my battles at the moment. So I didn't want to get into a whole thing on camera, and I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Why. It's just a few people said, "Oh, she's wearing a mask." Anyway, that's blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, no, totally, and I totally understand why they reacted, and I have no problem with them reacting like that. What isn't known is what I'm dealing with on my end. So in October, the same people that attacked my husband in 2012 when he came out in Project Camelot with Carrie Cassidy tried at the beginning of October to attack me on a multifaceted way using their networks. Now, apparently, after speaking with the daughter of one of these people, it's come to my attention that this ties into the Iranian government, the previous Iranian government that was basically pre-1979 revolution. So there seems to be, and of course, Iran is a non-centralized bank, right? So right before or right after Max's passing or his disappearance, whichever it is, we saw a huge turnover in Saudi Arabia at the House of Saud. We've heard that President Barack Obama facilitated a large plate of basically cash that was transported in a huge military plane to Iran, right? for those that were paying attention, in 2012, President Barack Obama started contracting with Eric Prince on United States soil, which is against the Posse Comitatus. This is what threw my husband into the interview with Kerry Cassidy's, and he made that very clear at the beginning, that many people within the United States who had given an oath to protect both foreign and domestic were very concerned with this December 25th midnight addition to the NDAA, which was the National Defense Authorization Act. And so basically, a lot of the private contractors who had been going over to Iraq and going over in a very profitable way were also knowledgeable that there were contractors on U.S. soil. So, but if you're a civilian, you know, caught up in the Kardashians, you're probably not paying attention to this stuff. So at the 2012 Super Soldier Summit, I went in the place of my husband, which I don't know if you knew that because you weren't at the first one. You were at the second one, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that may have been a miscommunication, is that during the first one my husband was supposed to attend, I went in his place. So I was very green to this whole situation, and I was basically thrown into it. I did my very best to represent him in his absence. At the time, he was a part of basically an operation that was happening on U.S. soil that was basically vetting the Department of Justice using the NSA. Nobody knew this at the time. So he came out on Kerry Cassidy's program and he announced, I won't be arrested. I'm part of something. I'm doing something. And he had just come out of Vegas. So this is before the Panama Papers had been released. This is before the NXIVM, Harvey Weinstein, Epstein ties had been exposed, and the thousands of shell corporations that were basically being created and moving money out of the Panama Papers law firm, right?
That was about 10 years later, wasn't it?
Fonseca, yeah. So Bill was the one basically researching what was happening in Vegas, and then went to Kerry and said on his second interview with Kerry, he let her know that he was in Vegas. He didn't go into the Panama Papers. He didn't go into anything more. He was trying to lay the foundation to build the trust. If she had the capacity to actually show up and care about her guests, which she didn't. So that was the problem, is that Kerry was not able to put her ego aside long enough to actually get the information that my husband was trying to present himself. And that's where there was a breakdown in communication, unfortunately, is that he was trying to give Kerry the information. Now, the third interview that he did with Kerry, I joined as a mystery guest. At the time, Kerry thought that it was another gentleman in Idaho that was going to join us. And this was a previous guest that she had on who she adored, which was Dr. Pete Peterson. So she was under the idea that Pete Peterson was going to be the third interview mystery guest. But what she didn't know is that I had been studying all of Pete's work for years, and that Pete wanted me to go on. He did not trust her because after the last interview he did with her, basically his wife died. He did not trust Kerry.
What do you mean by basically the wife?
He blamed Kerry. He blamed Kerry for his wife's murder.
In what way? I mean, this is a big accusation.
Because she didn't honor the context of which she was presenting herself initially. And this is something that came to be exposed with my husband going on her show, is that he gave a pseudonym in his first interview. And then he had people watching. You have to understand, the Mormon population makes up more than 60% of all intelligent assets in all agencies. Majority of assets in all intelligent agencies are Mormon. My husband comes out of Mormon, Utah. So he had people in every agency watching Kerry and watching her very closely. And she facilitated the delivering of his DD-214 and all of his intelligence that he'd given her in private for his protection and his family's protection, for money. And so there were people watching that saw that Carrie actually took a payment to backstab my husband during his transition between the first and second, third interview. So the third interview came up, and she knew that we were in proximity to Dr. Pete Peterson. So she was very excited that Pete was going to rejoin, because he has amazing intelligence. But he didn't ever have that intention. But he knew that I had been studying his work for years. So again, Carrie was given the opportunity to be present in the interview, but she refused, and she tried to shut me up repeatedly, and she talked down to me, which was fine. Look, in these situations, they're all shooting from the hip. You're going live. You don't always know what you're going to say. It's kind of like being plugged into a real-time downline, streaming into your consciousness. So I understand Carrie has to watch things, and that was a very heated time. So I always give people the benefit of the doubt. The problem is that she had so much opportunity on her lap to really make it and break a big story with Bill. But instead, she facilitated, and I believe it tied into her handler, Jack, in Australia, the guy with the cane, who potentially was tied into the Five Eyes. And we see what's happening in Australia right now, right? So who knows what Carrie is under? She's been going to Turkey a lot lately, which is where Khashoggi died, right? Who knows what Carrie's under, right? So I always give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm also going to speak to the fact that if they're compromised, that's something that needs to be known, because it puts other truthers in danger, which is, what I've said with you, Miles, is that I feel that Rink and Sarah Adams are not good people, and they may be stabbing you in the back, which you don't deserve. I feel you've done amazing work. You've come through what nobody else has come through in the BBC. You've come through being there for Max. You are one of the most important people in the truther community right now, and you stand genetically also to be in a position to hold a lot more truth moving forward, which is so exciting. And it's why I continue to fight for you, because you have done the work. You always give people the room to say, and you listen. That's a godsend in this day and age. So thank you.
Well, thank
and
you
this is the first
very
time
much
I've
for
said
that.
this.
I have to say it's not been a good week since the conference, I'll say that. Okay.
Interesting. That's unfortunate. Okay, so I'm glad to be on here with you now. And I'll just say a little prayer that I plead the blood of Jesus Christ over this recording and all of your work, all of the bases, all of your devices, and all of your future endeavors, because you have a future in this industry and you're leading it. And I'm so grateful that you came to the United States. And that's not easy. When people come to the United States, they're not always openly welcome with warm, reception. And Max saw that, I saw that, you saw that, right? Potentially, I don't know.
Well, I think they thought I was. Going back to the very first Congress, which I think was the third one I appeared, which I think the third one in the Showboat Hotel, I had a wake up call there, but that's another story with a great guy called Ray Wardle. But that's going back to 1994, I think, a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. It's like it becomes a self-reinforcing loop of stagnation for the United States. So it's a very tricky thing to tread, right? It's very tricky. I've been married to my husband, for 10 years. I haven't seen him in 7. He disappeared in 2014. And when he came out in 2012, he was immediately attacked by a group out of Florida. And because of his position potentially as part of the Nines, which would be the opposite end of SEAL Team 6, which was a black team for years.
Now, when you say the 9, are you referring to the Richard C. Hoagland thing, Uri Geller thing, the 9, or what?
It could potentially, I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, and it could potentially go into Giza intelligence, right? So we're dealing with SEAL Team 6 and 9 for years were both black. SEAL Team 6 did not exist until Obama said, yay, we got Osama bin Laden thanks to SEAL Team 6. That was the first time the public was given knowledge that SEAL Team 6
Were they all taken out and basically disposed of after that?
Well, if you understand that Osama bin Laden was already dead, then if you have that kind of knowledge, you would understand that the whole front story that exposed SEAL Team 6 was in and itself not valid. So right from the get-go, Obama was bringing SEAL Team 6 out of the Black projects, he was giving them a legitimate cover story in the media to pull them away from Hillary Clinton, to pull them out of the Black projects, and to put them into a position where they were now able to kill them publicly under the guise of faking their death, of putting them all on one helicopter, which they would never logistically put all those assets, which are multi-million-dollar assets, on one
Yeah, well,
helicopter.
they've certainly done that in Northern Ireland with a lot of
You said
intelligence
that.
people. Yeah.
And standing operating procedure would never allow for such a thing, both for insurance and tactical protection. They would never do that. So whenever you see those kinds of hanky, like tip of the hat, tongue-in-cheek moves, it's kind of saying, hey, look over here. But they can't tell you because it's, national security. But it's enough of a wink, wink, nod, nod, elbow, elbow, that for anyone who's actually caring and paying attention, they'll be able to see that this is not legitimate. So what I'm saying is that I believe this was a global effort of spec operators all over the globe that were basically putting, their best forward under the guise of faking their death to then start to move this change. And I said this in 2017 when you and I did that interview.
So this was a case of bringing people, bringing a Black team into the light, and then immediately basically burying them again.
Cutting them, so bringing them out of the Black that was being used by the cabal, legitimately giving them a status on the front of the public knowledge, then faking their death to pull them into a task force that they could then start to do what they signed up to do, which is to protect children, humanity, and to be a global effort to move this forward. Because, we had Patriarch Kirill and Pope Francis meet in Antarctica. We had that Ark of Gabriel potentially unearthed in Mecca. So there's something happening that humanity is under a bit of a time crunch. We need all these spec operators that are logistically, sound and spiritually sound, that actually have the wherewithal intrinsically to stand, to be unified across the globe to move this forward fast enough, I think.
Now, there's been certain individuals in I would call it the Love and Light movement, saying that all the leaders have been brought to Antarctica in November. They've all been told if they don't surrender humanity, they're all going to be disposed of. But if they do surrender it, they will be taken off to different planets of paradise and whatever. Sounds a bit like hooey. And this is November 2021.
Right.
About the current situation.
They all went there. And it's interesting because the only church that's operating in Antarctica is the Russian Orthodox Church. That's the only one that has a base building facility there. And we had Patriarch Kirill and Pope Francis meet and exchange documents there, which hasn't happened in years. Potentially, we had the Ark of Gabriel unearthed at Mecca and transported by submarine, which is a lot like Ghislaine Maxwell and the Alec Baldwin director ties the submarine community to
that you're referring
Antarctica.
to the murder by accidental use of a stage prop on the Alec Baldwin set, film shooting of movie.
And she grew up on a Ukraine submarine base. So her father was a head of a submarine task division in Ukraine. So if Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony is wrapping up this week, which it is, and Ghislaine had her submarine license, there could be evidence potentially coming out here that is sealed still, but that could potentially tie into Ukraine. And what's going on yesterday is Poroshenko was arrested and potentially set to be tried for treason in Ukraine. So
I mean, we're talking 21st of December here, just from a dateline point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So yesterday, Poroshenko was arrested, citing potential treason charges. So that could be that girl that was shot was brought in as witness protection.
Okay.
Yep. So we have these big things happening that aren't necessarily being connected for the majority of us in the public arena.
Now,
right?
your speech is being sort of getting a bit. You can hear the audio being recycled somewhere, but okay. Say that
So
again.
basically,
Could you recenter the shot? Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So I was just saying that for the majority of us, we're not being given these tie-ins. We're not being given all these little breadcrumbs. So because I wasn't given any information, I've had to seek, and both in prayer and, in watching what comes out in the news for breadcrumbs. And so I'm trying my very best to present this in a way that gives hope. As far as what just happened in Antarctica, I believe
Did it happen, or
there
is it? Or I mean, I'm talking about right
I
now,
haven't
the last 6
yes,
weeks.
I understand. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but I heard about this. So thank you for reminding me. I've been dealing with quite a bit here on the local front, like you, I think. So I have to look into that. The other
I think Michael
interesting thing
Sala was talking about that.
okay, he's usually pretty solid, isn't he?
I can't comment. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. So the other interesting aspect to Antarctica that's come out recently is that all of these variant strains of COVID are named after islands just off of Antarctica.
Aha.
So
Didn't know that.
so it makes me wonder if there's some bacteria coming out of the ice that they're slowly exposing humanity's population to, either in the vaccine or in the air, tied to the beings in Antarctica.
Yes, and those beings are ancient terrestrials.
Correct. Yeah. So it's interesting that all these islands, there's a Delta Island, there's an Omrayukon, or however you say it, island, there's a Corona Nation Island. So all of these strains or variants of Corona are in name around the Antarctic mass.
So are we saying that whoever's in Antarctica is basically wanting their planet back?
And this ties into what Bill said, my husband said when he came out. He said humanity is being given a chance. So if the Nazis went to Antarctica, some went to Argentina, maybe some went to the moon, we have beings that have basically been working with knowledge that the rest of us have been sequestered from, right? And potentially Ubermunch type things. And this ties into Jeffrey Epstein.
You're talking, when you say you're talking about bio-robots?
I'm talking about eugenicists first and foremost, which we've always heard the moon had a sect of Nazi eugenicists that were very elitist in their genetic DNA, and the Mormons are notorious for this as well.
Yeah.
And there's whispers that the Mormons are basically part of the secret space program. Jeffrey Epstein, it's come out, he was 100% looking to build an Ubermunch eugenic program. Now,
what does that word mean in English? That's Superman.
Superman in German.
Yeah.
And in the opening statement of Ghislaine Maxwell's court case, her lawyer referred to her as Eve, as the biblical Eve of the Bible. People thought that they were trying to paint her as innocent. No. They missed the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was trying to create a genetic race. So they're using Ghislaine Maxwell's genetics as Eve to recreate humanity.
In the last month, October, that's that Janet Ossebard and her friend had a Zoom in October, I think it was, and they sent. I was asked to release it as Basis 100. Okay, now they are talking about black-eyed babies, the babies of vaccinated couples on both sides, male and female, have been fully vaccinated, and the first children of that bonding, which is only a year. So we're dealing really right now with the early development of the children they have.
Right.
A, they have black eyes, and B, they develop at least 8 times faster than a human baby would. They're walking quicker. They're much smarter. They're very aggressive and strong. And that is literally information which is only about 6 weeks old, maybe a couple of months. So if they're creating a new species, that would appear to be indicated by those who have got the full vaccines as opposed to the fake vaccines. And we're probably not even allowed to say even any of this. We'll get it out one way or another.
Okay, so this
In other
ties
words,
into
it would
the fact,
fit in with what you're talking about.
yeah, and most people don't know this. This is very important. Is that Fauci, his group, his network group, his funding group, his close associates were the ones funding Ghislaine Maxwell's house before she was arrested. So it could be that this whole vaccine program is being run by the eugenicists tied to the moon, tied to China, because China just went. And it was interesting because they named their satellite that landed on the moon Changes, much like David Bowie's, some tied to David Bowie. And I think
Now,
Max made a reference.
David Bowie's daughter, now one of the first basis witnesses, Lisa Williams, she went to Germany and she talked to and had a meeting with David Bowie's daughter. We're talking 15 years ago.
Okay.
And there's a connection there with the whole manufacture of strange-looking humans, to quote Barry King's father in 1945. That
So
the Germans were
David
working
Bowie's daughter is in Germany?
This was in a region of Germany, possibly Poland, and we're talking 15 years ago.
Okay.
And,
Interesting.
There was a communication that Lisa had, and Lisa is one of the few independent researchers who's aware of the DVD, which is the secret German intelligence agency who installed Hitler and actually were taking Hitler out. They blew Hitler up because he did a Mrs. Thatcher, decided to stay too long. But that didn't work. But this is crucial to how we did not win World War II. We are now in a Fifth Reich, as the Fourth Reich was de facto the American Republic, the American Empire, under the CIA, who run the whole UFO project, and the EU, the European Union. And that has now come to an end, and we're now in the Fifth Reich. James Casbolt corrected me when I said Fourth Reich. He specifically referred to the Fifth Reich, and that is 3 years ago, because the last time I saw James would have been just before he didn't get released, which would have been just before the pandemic. 2 years ago.
Right.
Two and a half
and
years
I
ago.
remember in the interview that he and Max did together, they both referenced the differences of the Fourth Reich and the Fifth Reich. They mentioned that in that Carrie Cassidy interview as well. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. And I think this is it, is that there's a loose general plan trajectory. And then the adjustments always have to be made based on the collective consciousness. Recently, I think Trudeau came out and he said there was a loophole about the majority. Now, he was referencing the majority of the population in Canada has been vaccinated, so therefore they can supersede the rights of the unvaccinated, and that was the loophole he was referencing.
Well, in this country, a senior journalist, former editor of the Times, whose name escapes me once again, has written in the Daily Mail, I think the Sunday Mail, that it's time to punish the unvaccinated. If I could remember his bloody name, his nickname is his nickname is Brillo, former editor of the Times and a key freelance journalist on BBC and formerly of GB News. If I could remember his bloody name. Okay, which is garbage. That's garbage.
The problem is that in order for the beings in Antarctica to even succeed, which they too are a part of this equation, they know they need us. That's the problem, is that they must adhere to free will. They will not allow for the free will to be quashed, because it's such a very delicate equation right now that's blossoming, and it is working. It is.
Well, if you destroy free will, you destroy your existence, because you will. Nothing can remain static. Free will is a dynamic state of order.
Right.
It can adjust quickly, instantly, by perception to changes in circumstances.
Correct.
If you stop that, you're finished. Anything that does that is finished.
Correct. And this is what the crux of the January 6th, January 20th breakdown within the United States White House continuity of government was all about, is that President Trump was heard saying that he was wishing and praying that Vice President Pence was going to back him in the Senate and the Congress and the House and say, this is wrong and President Trump is right. Now that we now know Vice President Pence didn't do that. And so many people thought that Vice President Pence was a traitor because he didn't have President Trump's back, but he did. It was just in a totally different way than most people were paying attention, because Mike Pence is an evangelicist Catholic. Those two things do not go together, but he has himself created his own identification of what he aligns himself with. Okay. So now you have to understand that he was also networking with the Department of Justice and the UCMJ JAG judges. So there was a 3-layer back naval intelligence project going on simultaneously. And what Vice President Pence knew is that Pompeo was plugged into the Orthodox Ukrainian church that was just opening up. And Pompeo, being CIA, he was absolutely not honoring free will, because there will be multifaceted players in this equation. You have to have people from every side. That means there will be Templars. That means there will be Satanists. There will be people of free will choosing what they have to choose in order to hold the post of what they are given to hold that post at. So free will is of the utmost importance. Pompeo was not honoring that. So Vice President Pence knew he had to let this naval intelligence thing go on that was like 3 or 4 layers back play, because he had to allow all these people to show themselves through free will, give them the chance to show themselves, which is one of the most important standing operating procedures. Is you have to prove or disprove somebody is or isn't by giving them the opportunity to choose. And it's only in giving them that opportunity to choose that then they expose themselves as what they authentically are.
Yes.
So that's the breakdown, is that people didn't understand that. So with Poroshenko being arrested, the schism in the Orthodox Church, right? The rest of the churches, Patriarch Kirill, Bartholomew, are not identifying the Ukrainian Orthodox new church that Pompeo helped create as authentic, viable identity. Whether or not it should or shouldn't be is a separate conversation, but perhaps the people that were backing that church initially were of concern. If they're the human traffickers profiting off of children's deaths and what have you, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that could be the crux of the issue, is who was backing it. Because a church becomes a bank, right? Okay.
So this is going deep back in time, but not that far back in terms of what's gone on in Antarctica, because that must have been flooded out and frozen 12,500 years ago.
Okay, what is your understanding of what happened when the Ark of Gabriel was in Earth? Because in some of the intelligence that came out around that time, they said that it sent off some kind of frequency and that people were killed. They blamed it on a crane falling on a crowd, but that it was actually a frequency released when it was unearthed. And
this is in Antarctica. Could you refer?
Mecca. It was found.
The Mecca.
The Ark of it was found in Mecca and it was unearthed there. And it was around the time that the House of Saud was going through a transition where the Crown Prince was taking more control, 2014 era. And and I'm wondering if that unearthing of the Ark of Gabriel released some kind of frequency that is allowing.
I have to say that I'm thinking very strongly of what was featured in 2001: A Space Odyssey, when something was uncovered. It's just
okay. Well, it could tie into what Max and Casbolt were speaking about, because they did say in their interview with Carrie they were getting ready. Well, Casbolt specifically, he said he was getting ready to be a part of something, and he couldn't speak to it. And this was in Vegas.
Yeah.
Right. So this is before he returned back to the
Well,
UK
when he
and
came
was
here,
arrested.
he did seem to actively decide to go into the dark.
Hmm.
So whether there were things in the dark or with the jinn, that need to be sorted out on an energetic level in complex number
Hmm.
space or whatever.
Interesting. Very
Because if
interesting.
you're going to bring new people into the equation, everybody in the different spatial and dynamics, demonic realms, everything, they all have to be involved.
When he said, he made a
One
point
way
of
or another.
saying during his interview with Carrie in Vegas with Max is sitting beside him, he made a point of saying most people are trying to go heavy into their light, into, you know, he said, but right now what's required is that I have to go into my dark. And he said it.
Well, that certainly
Now,
is why he really made sure he was arrested. I mean, he was throwing bricks at windows to get me arrested.
well, and then we
And that's,
saw
yeah.
the fact that John Kerry went to Antarctica after Patriarch Kirill and Pope Francis met there. John Kerry, who is Skull and Bones, went to Antarctica. Apparently, he was refused by these beings. They refused to work with him, and they stated that basically they said, "Do not come back. Anyone to do with Skull and Bones is unwelcome." And he left and went to New Zealand, and then New Zealand had a huge earthquake. So whether that was tied
Well,
to
the
the CIA using,
Prime Minister of New Zealand is a student of Klaus Schwab, trained up, one of the worst
right,
prime
and you said
ministers
that.
apart from Trudeau. And of course, this is all under the rule and auspices of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This is all on her watch.
Okay, now
And
we
the
touched.
Falklands
Okay,
War was
right.
crucial in recovering all the sentient fluid from Thule Island on the George Islands, and that's what the British got. They got what the Germans had refined with the Blue Greys. 400 crates, possibly more, of sentient fluid was taken from that base, and the Marine who blew it up has been here, and the British took that
Okay,
and they've distributed
people
that
do not
with England.
understand this story at all out here, Miles, and you know so much. Can you please start at the beginning about this
Right.
story? The Falklands.
The key feature, the key reason for the Falklands War was there was some kind of Argentinian, we were told, activity in the Georgia Islands, which are a ring of islands south of the Falklands. And
And the Falklands are how close to
The
Antarctica?
Falklands are a group of islands off Argentina, and this group of islands, one of which is called Thule Island, that's Thule Island, that's Thule, was a German stroke DVD submarine refueling base between the last main landmass, i.e. the Falklands, and Antarctica itself. And there was a laboratory there, and that is what the British recovered. They had two surface ships, two cruisers, a cargo ship, and a submarine. The submarine had special boat force, the special boat service, and the SAS, and also the commandos. And the commandos basically took care of the surface Argentinian weather station. And the special boat service and the special air service went into the base where the Argentinians and Blue Greys were refining this sentient fluid. Now, Alec Newell, I think, released that story through quite some time
This
ago.
is amazing.
And then, okay, so that's all been released on Nexus Magazine. David Griffin did all that, a lot of that stuff. But the actual commander, the commando, the man who actually put the explosives in to terminate the base, explained where there were 400 crates, big crates, about 1.5 meters long, about 1.5 meters high-ish, roughly, interlinked like teeth on a zip.
Right.
And
Like
the
a
British
zipper.
removed those crates, of 400 of them. Now, when he publicly stated, he only said about 40 when he spoke at the bases at the Black Swan. And this guy's
Okay.
called John. And Then there was a blue ice. One of the things which is in
Right.
Antarctica and is this blue ice, which my understanding is they're not able to get any. They don't know how to. They don't know what it is because it disappears as soon as you try to make any samples. That kept this stuff at minus 22 degrees Celsius. The British took it out. When they removed all that, they blew the living hell out of the place. They bombed it, blew it up, shelled it, blew the whole place to hell. And all this stuff came to England, and that was where the Marconi scientists, when they tried weaponizing what became the black goo, the sentient material, intelligent oil, they all self-terminated. Something like between 20 and 40 young people committed suicide, at which point it publicly was disposed of. And this black goo the British had, we couldn't weaponize it.
Okay, so for most people listening right now,
that's going back to 1982, the mid 80s.
Okay, so most people won't know what we're talking about right now that are in the civilian sector. A good reference would be the Spider-Man version where he becomes encased with this black liquid that turns him into another version of Spider-Man with sharp razor teeth, and it has its own consciousness and it takes over Spider-Man. This is what we're talking about in the black goo.
This black sentient fluid is not actually black. When you open the crate, it's got a thinnish brown layer on top of it, and if you put your finger in or look anywhere near it, it'll try to come up and meet you. Now, bearing in mind that in terrestrial oil, the Iranians have had a certain amount of their oil would not refine. And I spoke to a Russian businessman who was taken to this lake. You couldn't refine it. They couldn't put it back in the ground. And this was full of the sentient oil within crude oil. And this sentient oil came up to him in the desert. It came up towards him out of the lake and surrounded him. And he had an unconsciousness encounter with this sentient fluid, and it communicated with him saying that we are here to clean up your mess.
Right.
Now, the bottom line is that we are either part of the solution or we are part of the problem. So we work with this, and this sentient
Fifth Reich comes in.
Yeah, but this sentient oil, which is in crude oil, is terrestrial. The oil that the Germans refined in Antarctica and Argentina is extraterrestrial. And some of those meteors which came in, most of them landed in South America. Some of it landed in Ireland. And one of the places it landed was in my hometown of Lurgan, where there are 3 sections of that black stuff in the ground in County Armagh, Northern Ireland.
Okay. So for another reference point, I've always believed that when we heard about the boys from Brazil, I always felt that it was actually Argentina. But they just used Brazil as the cover story.
Yeah, that would fit. Which is why the Germans went down there. They were working with all that stuff, and they first picked it up when they went to Antarctica. The reason why they went to Antarctica was because of all that. And of course, the Order of the Black Sun, as Linda Howe explained, on this huge building, the logo of the Order of the Black Sun is on that building.
And the boys from Brazil were genetically modified, potentially with Hitler's DNA. Is that correct?
I don't know. I don't think they would use Hitler's DNA. I think that would be a distraction.
I believe that there was genetic material recovered. Hitler was a devout occultist who was always searching for the unknown versions of things that were hidden.
But then
in every culture.
This brings in Marconi and whatever vehicle that the Germans built. Win Keach explained that they thought they were building a spacecraft or some kind of flying saucer spacecraft. What they were building was some kind of portal.
Interesting, like a star.
Yeah. And of course, this goes right back to the Glock and
the Dagoff,
yeah,
and the red mercury.
Yeah. The counter-rotating energy fields, crucially, counter-rotating energy fields within the same space produces a scalar. It produces a scalar energetics, and that is what the Hadron Collider is. It's a huge scalar energy generator, which goes outside 3D space-time.
So this is what I'm saying is like when Max and Casbolt did their interview in Vegas, they kind of were saying there was a plan to move things forward involving the Fifth Reich.
Well, that's why he was killed twice in Poland. They were extracting his primary programming. And remember, Max did that ceremony with Orlando Bloom, with the Archbishop of Canterbury, 30 years ago.
Right, and it was interesting just last week. The Canterbury priest came out and was like,
"This is the Archbishop of Canterbury." Yeah, the Archbishop of Canterbury performed a ceremony with Orlando Bloom and Max, and right. Max Orlando got the acting, whatever part of that, and Tim Rifat's done a very detailed series of talks about what was the whole purpose of that procedure with Max. Nagger old man or something, words to that effect. And this is intricate to a whole range of stuff like that.
Well, and I think that may what you're saying he was presenting as far as the ritual that Max was involved with. There was the agenda, but Max is such a dynamic soul that's kind of what he was going through at the first and second Super Soldier Summit, was a renegotiation of all of it. And that's where I think Max has become this unpredictable element in all of this equation.
Well, and we've got the situation where James Casbolt was commanding Max, and everybody there were taken for whatever bloody reason.
Well, see, this is part of Rink's BS, and this is what I hate, is that Rink had, I believe, met with Preston Nichols, which was part of the East Coast trip chair people, Montauk program, and that he was giving Casbolt and Max's intel, and Haley's, more importantly, Haley's codes. And he was the little troll, as Max called him, that was triggering people to spin out. And I watched him do it with Casbolt. Around that time of their story of the van pulling up and pulling everyone into this van in their latex suits, it was their porn version of bullshit that Rink is plugged into.
Melinda Leslie mentions that. I certainly have a recollection of I needed to do something to protect myself, which I did, and an independent observer here noticed what I had done. I'm not going to say what I did, but I did something which was a protection mechanism. And so there must have been something going on there.
Oh, I'm sure there was.
I mean, I don't remember it. I don't remember any van or any two vans.
Casbolt triggered into this obnoxious altar. And it was just sad because it mocks all of who Casbolt is and his bravery and his courage. And he came out first. He was one of the first ones out. And it's sad because Rink is a troll. And Max called it. Max said James Rink is a troll, and he is selfish. He promoted Hillary when everybody was very aware that what Hillary was doing was abusing everyone on the face of the planet. You know, Rink is just plugged into all of that garbage, and he's running Sarah. That's the sad part. So that means that Rink is plugged into Podesta, and Podesta has a huge network of the law firms. Right. And if it is true, then God bless him and Godspeed to his mission.
We're talking, this is, okay, continuing.
Well, what I wanted to say is that...
we're 1 hour in on this now, okay?
Rink is responsible for some destructive things.
Why do you say that? You've got to back that up. Okay, why are you saying that about James Rink?
Because I watched him trigger Casbolt. I watched him pick up the phone and call me and try to run his little, ha ha ha, this just happened, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what, James? While you were filming Max dying, your version of a snuff film, in the apartment, I'm on the phone with somebody in federal prison working with the United States Naval Intelligence trying to... basically take down the Panama Papers and the IBM, the Weinstein, and the Epstein stuff. I'm the one holding in a marriage, an energetic yoking that's very serious. I don't have time to listen to your bullshit phone call about how you want us to say we were all put in latex and taken into a van, ha ha ha, and they ate our poop. Like, okay, you know what? I get you have to work with what you have. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of James Rink's bullshit and him triggering Casbolt. Now, this is what I'm trying to say is Casbolt was an outsider. Even though he went through his initial Mormon regiment, the first 2 levels,
which he then
in
that's
Texas.
his other name is
Michael Prince.
No, Michael Prince, but the other one is father as a priest, doesn't he?
Right.
Romano,
Right.
Romano
Okay.
or something.
Okay.
A Mormon
Melchizedek.
priest. Avalon.
No, but under the Melchizedek priesthood.
Okay, I don't know. Explain.
Okay, so there's 2 levels that Casbolt went through in Texas when he joined. He was fast-tracked through the army, I believe.
Yes.
And he took on the Melchizedek priesthood under the Mormon umbrella faith. So there's levels, right? Stages. And that's what they call it, the Melchizedek priesthood. We had then come out that the army was directly plugged into NXIVM. So the military was not only heavily steeped, the army was not only heavily steeped in a rape protocol going on, contagious rape protocol going on within the United States Army, but that they were also involved with the NXIVM.
Explain that rape protocol, because there was a situation here in the UK near the Farnborough base area, deep cut barracks, where there was terrible things done with certain female soldiers, and there's a connection there.
Yeah. So basically, rape is always a tool of war, and it's to hijack a body genetics, because when semen and ovum come, or even the wall of a woman's reproductive unit is now in contact with the semen, there is a genetic knowledge transference and potentially an energetic effect of the brain. And I believe this is also the whole ritual of sodomy. When children are being sodomized, they're also being hijacked. So it's basically a spiritual hijacking through the sexual transference of genetic material, genetic fluids.
The Key of Solomon, I think it's called, procedure involves fracturing the personality of the children in care homes, which is why so many of them end up being controllable and used for political and other means.
Right. So this is it, is that rape is always a tool of war. It's never about sex. It's never about attraction. It's just a tool of war to hijack consciousness, to hijack a body, to hijack the genetics. So this is why, in the Bible, they say you should only get into a sexual union when you're covered by God, so that it's protected and that it can't be hijacked further. Which is why cheating would be energetically and spiritually so dangerous in positions of power, such as, military and or intelligence and or like a crown, right? So anyway, what I'm saying is that Casbolt, when he went into his training in Texas, he did take on also an army rank, and then he did take on a Mormon training priesthood. From that, we saw the exposure of NXIVM's involvement with the army. We saw that Kirsten Gillibrand, who is out of New York, who was purported to be the biological mother of the head girl that was charged in NXIVM's exposure. So she gave up, Kirsten Gillibrand out of New York, a senator, gave up her daughter to be adopted. And this head girl is the one that ran NXIVM. And Kirsten Gillibrand has direct ties to the army, military. She wrote a bill about rape in the military. Kirsten Gillibrand out of New York. So Casbolt goes into Texas. He joins the army, and we get the exposure of rape in the army. We get the exposure of NXIVM, which is tied to the work that my husband was doing in Vegas. But we have directly Casbolt going into that mess. So it could be that he was being used to infiltrate the rape, human trafficking that had infiltrated the U.S. Army. which would be so wonderful to validate Casbolt's work, because I will say this is that as an outsider, when you're not an American, even though my grandfather was born on the US, my mother's side is American. My mother's father was born in the United States. I have American blood. Even though I have that and I married an American, you know, they chose to work with Sarah first. Okay, because it's America first. Okay, fine. Well, go ahead, work with that. It's garbage. She's lying.
Yeah, but
Can't
there's a
build
hell
on
of a
that.
strong English connection there.
Okay, fine. But we're still trying to reconstruct some of the very vital things of the whole planet. The energetics of the money on the whole planet are the American United States dollar. Okay, whether or not we want that to go away or not, we still have to work with that energetic. It's still the energetic, right?
Yeah.
So here we go. And what I'm saying is that as an outsider who was not born in the US, I can identify with Casbolt and him being treated as an outsider, even if he had allegiance to a genetic race succeeding and a humanity level oath. He was treated as an outsider. I was treated as an outsider. Max was treated as an outsider, right? Because we weren't burnt. Yeah. So this is the sad part, is that you kind of have to earn your stripes while you're getting abused, trying to protect the people you're trying to help, which is shitty. But it's part of this process.
But that was all rushed through. I mean, it was rushed through very quickly.
He definitely had high up help. Absolutely.
Before his birthday and all that.
Yeah. So this is it. It's like there's so much that is going on that's tied into all the work that we did in 2012. And it's such a blessing that you made the second Super Soldier Summit. I'm so grateful. Your work is phenomenal. Like, there's nobody doing what you're doing.
Well, we got to get it back in the road.
Amen.
Yeah, amen.
So that's why I was praying that we could see some movement with you, perhaps, going to Belfast and doing some work in Ireland.
Well, I've been thinking about that. I mean, now I've got this conference done, out of the way, and we had a very good time. A lot of people enjoyed it. There was some hell-raising backstage stuff going on, which is to keep that backstage. So where do you feel that this is going now?
Next step? Yeah. What I keep getting is that President Trump is trying to tie up some of the last elements that have yet to be publicly addressed. So China, Wuhan, the virus, Ukraine, because Biden and Hunter are both potentially, President Biden and Hunter, his son, are both dually held kind of captive by elements of China and elements of Ukraine. So with Poroshenko being arrested yesterday, this is kind of like a
explain to those who haven't followed this particular detail, what are the significant issues and factors involving that arrest? And why should anybody care?
Well, I mean, to begin with, they're calling it treason. So it would be treason against Ukraine. Okay. How and why?
Which is a death sentence, obviously.
He left. Yeah, he left in 2019, his office. We have potentially this tying to that Orthodox church that was established in the Ukraine that doubles as a bank, right? Because we know that nonprofit status means that they can move stuff through it.
Okay, that's worth explaining. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had Pompeo, who was CIA, backing that church.
But that de facto brings you into the fundamental root of the German secret intelligence running that show.
Right.
And all those Russian Nazis have been chucked out of Russia, and they're all in Ukraine.
Right. So the idea is what happened to my husband. So when he went in undercover, he was like the Briar Rabbit to be thrown into the briar patch judicially, while the NSA, this was before Snowden, right? And yeah. Snowden was NSA. So before Snowden, my husband was the Briar Rabbit thrown into the briar patch while the NSA watched all of the people that were pulling the judges, the sheriffs, the lawyers, the law firm strings to get them to not help my husband or to do something against what should have been done.
So in many respects, he was used for target practice to see he was going to move, to take their move.
Right. So it's Briar Rabbit, right? Don't throw me in the briar patch. Oh, no. But he's a sailor who grew up in a submarine. So jail means nothing to him. You know, he's a Navy SEAL. He doesn't care. But nobody saw it like that, right? So then he creates the diversion. Snowden runs out the back door with all the intelligence of who's pulling the strings and seeks asylum eventually in Russia. Okay.
Which would have been throwing out the Nazis out of Russia to clean up the Russian government and military.
I mean, that's quite.
Is that me or you? That's me.
But this is the thing: is there's good and bad in everything. There's good and bad in the Nazis. There's good and bad in the Germans. There's good and bad in the DVD. There's good and bad in Russia. There's good and bad in Ukraine. So this is where I think we're at, is that potentially Poroshenko being arrested yesterday under the statement of treason, it could be similar to Khashoggi, because I don't believe Khashoggi died. He sought.
And who's this guy? Who's this guy? Explain that for an audience.
Khashoggi ties into Princess Diana, doesn't he?
I don't know. Sorry, I was distracted with an update.
He was a journalist who sought asylum in Turkey. Turkey is where Constantinople, the deciding factor of the Orthodox Church, the guy with the vote that can supersede any other vote.
And the Orthodox Church is the only church which is valid right now, because all churches associated with Rome are effectively disempowered as of quite recently, for want of a better term.
Well, this is what we're looking at, because we have a pope that's from Argentina. So all that black goo and all of that stuff tied to Argentina, and the Germans working in Argentina are tied to this pope. So Pope Francis meeting Patriarch Kirill in Antarctica is so huge, because it was Pope Francis and it was Patriarch Kirill of Russia.
Can you make any reference to who we're dealing with in Antarctica from those ancient times? I mean, the lights still work in the place.
Mm-hmm.
So we're told.
Well, it could be that there are underground bases in the ocean.
Well, the understanding is that the Germans have made a whole city under the ice down there, and they must be made that had the materials. And of course, we're dealing with Admiral Byrd, who went down there and got his ass kicked, high jump and all that. I think he went down there twice. There are some YouTube videos on that from, I think, the film crew that went down there, but a lot of that was dressage.
Well, and then we have people like Aaron McCullum, who came out in 2012, who talked about the genetic programs that were altering human genetics, in the USA for stargates that are underground in the ocean, the Gulf of Aden, and also, so what are we dealing with in Antarctica?
And then you got the hot zone, as Dark Journalist calls it, off Cuba.
Okay.
The so-called
the
Bermuda Triangle area, and of course the other zone which is associated with that is High Brazil, southwest of Cork in Ireland, and that all connects with some kind of Atlantis stuff, a city.
Right, exactly.
Cities of crystal.
And that's what I was getting, is that this underground base in Antarctica could be piggybacking off of a network of Atlantean type under ocean bases.
And bear in mind that Thule Island in South Georgia, ring of islands south of the Falklands in the southern hemisphere, there's a Thule Island up in Greenland, the Thule base in Greenland. So why do we have one north and why do we have one south?
Interesting.
Maybe they're going between
President
the poles.
Trump made a point of talking about Greenland as well and buying it.
Which island? The base?
Greenland? I believe that was Greenland.
Well, it's meant to be melting ice there, but we're we're in a moderate minimum. It's going to get colder for the next 22 years at least. So if people want to dig things up, they're going to have to make hay while the sun doesn't shine. Okay, have you...
I think we're good. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well...
I think we're good for now.
And with all due respects to all this, we've been saying things. If they want to have a right to reply, they're welcome to have a right to reply.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just cover is that I've been dealing with this John Walsh network. So John Walsh is a prominent person put on public television in the United States and North America as this hero. And he's been partnered with somebody who attacked my husband in early 2012. We've had a lot of intelligence coming out about Florida being used specifically by Ukraine and for human trafficking purposes. Much like Ireland, there was a lot of babies that were trafficked into the U.S.
And there are an associate number of companies which has got a head office here in Salisbury, I understand, which is a shell company, and that includes companies which involve aeronautics, shipbuilding technologies, and in other words, they can build any yacht, any boat with anything in it and make it look good.
Yeah. Well, so I've been dealing with this John
because Walsh there was a recent situation during this terrible crisis when a father... They held in the Republic of Ireland. They held a church meeting. They held a day of worship in a church in Republic. The Garda police came in to get rid of them and take them out, and they were face down by this guy. And the Garda were that's the Irish police, were thrown out. And early that morning, that particular individual's children were taken from him. Because in the Republic of Ireland, every single child born is a ward of state automatically. The children don't have the rights of their own children. And those children were taken and trafficked out of Ireland within a week.
How long has it been like that, Max?
Well, Ireland's north and south, the care home system is well known. My former colleague, Caroline Stevens, did some shows on that.
How long has it been like that, where the children are immediately away?
Well, that's been there for years.
Always?
Yeah.
What would it take to renegotiate that and no longer have that? Because being born on...
there was this was publicized and then basically buried. There was a children's home for unmarried mothers and all that. I think Northwest Ireland. And you're talking 1,000 skeletons of young children and young adult children, young teenage children, all found in a sewer in the septic tank. Something like 1,000 skeletons of.
Okay.
And that was run by the Church of Rome, the Catholic Church. And I'm not necessarily saying they're the only. I mean, this is rampant in Ireland.
Right. Okay. Well,
so, that was discovered and it was then publicized, and like everything else, the best way to bury a story is to tell everybody about it and then they forget it because it's not secret.
Okay, we told you about this. I know that Pan Am Airlines was caught smuggling babies, pregnant mothers on their planes that would give birth to Irish babies in the air. So they were.
Well, there is a lady called Sophia who gave her statements here, a long series of statements. She was in the same area of Reading where James was as a child and did similar things. And I've got a third person who came up along on that sort of level. That particular individual who's just come up.
What's her name?
And we called her Sophia Green. And she was an update to Basis 1 because she was completely re-verifying everything that Barry King said way back in 94. And that is the
Okay, so
Reading base, the snuff movie stuff made by Jimmy Savile, for Jimmy Savile, and all that stuff that James outed to the police just before his arrest. He outed it because he spoke to a person he was helping. That person told me on camera about it, and I'm duty bound by law to tell the cops about it, which I did,
right,
and that was all
right.
covered up. So she came along. The Reading whole area is all big underground base area. Salisbury Plain, huge. You know,
Okay, so
it's
interesting.
all
So it would
limestone,
be,
so they can have lots of stuff in there.
so if the Catholic Roman Church was taking Irish genetics as their word of the state from birth, if they're born on Ireland,
Yeah.
that would make sense now why Pan Am was smuggling
Yeah, but on top of
the
that,
women. Wait,
Ava,
just wait.
yeah,
Pan Am was smuggling the mothers that were pregnant into the air so that they gave birth right before they gave birth in air. So they weren't potentially giving birth to these children on Ireland soil, but they
well,
were the
this
genetics.
is what
And then they were
this is.
smuggling them into the
Yeah,
US.
yeah, but this girl, this woman, Sophia, was born on baby farms in southern Africa. I strictly say not south, but southern Africa, and she's white. It's not as if they're breeding. So these baby farms are for food and for all sorts of stuff in the underground bases, which are run all over the bloody place. The tunnel network, detailed tunnel stuff. She gave I think 4 separate interviews, which each were 3 hours long, something like that. And
Well,
she also spoke at the bases
because
conference.
it's another part of the equation that we don't get in North America about the children born in Ireland being wards of the state immediately.
It's an open secret. There was a horrendous case involving the Northern Ireland MPs in Northern Ireland, known as Kincora, and that was investigated and covered up. The Kincora scandal.
That would make sense why if
and there are
Germany is helping.
There are other people. Well, Ireland is a client state of Germany, the DVD.
Yeah.
De Valera, Lloyd George, a lot of the whole infrastructure of Ireland is basically backdoor German DVD, black and tans, all that poisoning and gas and bloody.
So maybe they're actually trying to help Ireland become free of the Roman Catholic control.
Well, the key to it in the north was that there were individuals in Northern Ireland, specifically brought in by a company which operates out of Portland, Oregon, and there's a Portland, Oregon's got the...
What?
Yeah, and they were hiring people from Belfast in Northern Ireland specifically for the purpose of their ability to directly do a mind link, conscious link, communicating with the AI in computers.
Right, okay. And that ties into the AM frequency, perhaps?
Yeah. It's all there.
Okay, I'm listening.
So obviously when I run a pirate station blasting the hell out of Belfast with a different thought process, they didn't like it.
Okay. Excellent.
And they don't like people.
This is so good.
Yeah. A lot of people don't.
They don't like what?
They don't like that. I'm not like that. If I just send an email to the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum to talk about Irish commercial radio archives and the culture of the pirate stations, they don't want to know. They won't reply. In fact, the Northern Ireland UFO people suddenly didn't want to know me either.
Well, this is the thing, though, is that the work that you are doing is running parallel to Vatican II. The work that you are doing is the solution. You're the solution. You're doing the research of non-biased, very, heart on your sleeve. You're giving everybody a chance to put their cards on the table so that all the puzzle pieces can be lined up. And the boundaries.
That's why it is. That's what the basis is. It's a research. It's a researcher's research. Resource.
You're doing the solution for the. It's so awesome. It's so awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Eva. I'm not good on praise.
Okay, but look, this is my prayer. I could see you getting Vatican funding there, that you retain 100% rights to all of your information and any direction that you want to go, but a budget that would be facilitated by Vatican. Now, where this falls into...
The Vatican hasn't got a good track record. I mean, would I want to take money from the Vatican? A lapsed Protestant like me?
Well, here's
I mean,
where
there's a
this is where
joke
it gets
about lapsed
good.
Catholics and there's a joke about lapsed Protestants. There's a bit too involved in Northern Ireland.
Okay, I might not have it here, but there's a book,
And
Teilhard.
just so you know,
French...
when James spoke at the Barge Inn, the so-called bases at the Barge, there was an agent from the Vatican there. So that was interesting.
Okay, so listen. There was a gentleman, his name was Teilhard. He was a Jesuit. He was a philosopher and a quantum physicist. And he also spoke about the evolution of genetics on Earth. Pope Francis just recently said he's considering revisiting Teilhard's work. It's so bridging the evolutionary concepts of genetic, like with
But
the...
this is the whole point about Zacharias Sitchin. Zacharias Sitchin was a Vatican agent in terms of him. He was his work. I understand was the whole point of that was to steer it in favor of the Church of Rome's agenda.
Right, and this is where I'm saying it would be wonderful if you were given 100% autonomy, complete control over all your agendas and directions and rights, royalties, everything, but given the funding to do what you do naturally, because it is so much in alignment with where we need to go. And that's what we need. We need individuals whose genetics are turned on and communicating with Source, with Holy Spirit, with God, in a way that is saying F you to all the dogma and breaking down all of the bullshit lies, and providing solution and providing information and providing answers.
That's what it's all about.
That's what you're doing.
Providing solutions as opposed to scaring the heebie-jeebies out of everybody.
Amen.
Yeah.
See, and Teilhard, he was shut down by the Roman Catholic Church. He was like...
Explain who this guy was.
He was saying too much truth. He was a quantum physicist. So he was talking about how important science was. And they were like, and they cut him off. They shut him down. And I've been petitioning. My dad did work with Teilhard's work. There's a court case in Texas about Teilhard's work. Pope Francis is openly considering revisiting all of Teilhard's work because of his science element. And Arizona has that Lucifer telescope. So there is the scientific elements that are part of the Vatican. The Mormon Church is a wing of the Vatican. Scientology is a wing of the Vatican. My dad sold software to the JPL laboratory, which Max always thought was hilarious.
Well, there's a whole different story about that.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. We're there. We're starting. The schism needs to be healed. And how the schism is healed is by providing authentic truth and having somebody strong enough in the Vatican that isn't going to be threatened to continue to hold the umbrella to protect the truth. That's how it was supposed to always be, is an umbrella to protect the truth, not hide it and bury it and kill anyone telling it. But it went that way.
I think the Vatican and a few others have got a few problems on their hands, but we'll have to see how that goes. Amen. Eva, good morning to you and good night from me.
All right. Thank you for your time, and God bless you and all your team and all your work and all your devices and all your recordings and your files. Thank you, Miles.
And thank you. And as I say, if you want to put your cards on the table, the microphone's open. This thing.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't do that right. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks, Miles.